Welcome everybody to another episode of Learning with Belvista Studios. This is our opportunity to be curious about people that are doing things that are intriguing and that inspire us and we feel that we can learn from. And my guest today is Amanda. We've been acquaintances for some time now, actually. You first came onto the radar out of nowhere and joined our human-centered design cohort, and then embraced that, came back for some coaching, been doing some great things. Welcome to our podcast, Learning with Belvista Studios. How does it feel to be here? From learner to now expert on whatever you're going to provide value on this episode.
Oh no, I wish I could say expert. That would make me feel better. That would help my imposter syndrome at work, but I don't know if it's quite there yet. But no, it's good. It's good to be here.
That's cool. Well, one thing like I do want to recognize you for is your curiosity for learning. And I feel that you really, truly do embrace that. Like, you always had good questions. You were always thinking about, okay, well then how does that apply for what I'm doing? And you do put yourself into courses a bit, you get coaching, all of that. So you're a sponge. And I think not everyone does that. So I just want to recognize you for that, because even like working with you, I do see that growth. And like, actually, that's what I love as well, is every time I'm like, this, and you're like, okay, I got my homework. And then you come back and you're like, yeah, I did that and more. And here's how it ended up. And this is how I managed it. So what's really cool is that you're executing on it and you're kind of taking it further than I could have imagined for yourself because of your curiosity for learning. I feel that that is your accelerator for like more application of your learning.
Yeah. I mean, my original career, or my first chosen career, was in education, right? So I was like a teacher. And I think part of being a teacher, like, you obviously you want to teach because you like learning, right? Like, you want to share what you're excited about. So, a lot of times when you meet teachers, like, they get inspired. I shouldn't say every teacher, but most teachers I've met have been inspired to teach because they like learning, right? They like that, and they like sharing kind of that passion or joy for it. And for anybody who knows the teaching situation in the US, it's not the best. And so quite some time ago, I switched from teaching into tech, right? But one of the things I like about technology is that, like, in order to stay on top of it, you have to continuously learn. You can't like just learn one coding language or learn one thing about software. It's going to change in 6 months, 8 months, like, you have to continuously keep up with it. And so it's really fun for me because, like, I have to constantly push myself to learn and do things. And because that's a passion of mine, it ends up being something like, I just do it because I would do it anyways. I do it about anything. Weightlifting. I do it there too. Like,
in any aspect of your life, do you like learning?
Yeah. So I have like many little buckets of things that I kind of jump between, but I go back to kind of like the same buckets, if that makes sense. So like cooking is a passion of mine. And so maybe for like a couple months, I'm really into cooking and I'm learning all about it. And then like exercising and stuff. And so then I get really into like right now I'm really into weightlifting again. And so like heavy lifts and all of this stuff, and I'll watch videos about it and try to fix my form and do things like that. And then, my career stuff is kind of a little separate, and I'll always pick like something new for that, right? Like right now I'm trying to get better at analytics. And so like, that's all the stuff I'm really delving into before. And when I reached out to you guys, it was really, again, around like kind of that instructional design, but then also like, how can I pivot that into user research? How can I pivot that into product management? Like, for both of those, human-centered design is like pivotal, right? So I have that same passion, and it just kind of flows from one thing to the other. So yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I think one thing, like learning's really cool, but I think there's like a difference between almost like learning in private is how I want to describe it, where like learning on YouTube and reading books and things like that. But then what I feel like you're really good at is just identifying that's going to be my maximum way to learn and expose
Mm,
myself to deep learning. And a lot of that does fall through where you're really putting yourself out there to be the complete beginner. And I'm
yeah.
not saying you came to us like that, but even like you sign up for coaching, and a lot of people can feel very vulnerable doing that. You're really
Hmm.
exposing yourself because you don't know what's going to come up and how you can be perceived. And there's all that self judgment. And with the coaching, you are exposing yourself, but you really embrace it. And
Yeah.
I'd just love to hear why and how that's benefited for you, because I feel like that could be a release for people to reach their goals the same
Yeah.
way you are.
Yeah. I think for me, it really shifted when I started getting into martial arts, which sounds
Mm.
weird, but like, so I started doing like Muay Thai and Jujitsu, and like in those situations, I'm what I call a learned athlete. I'm not naturally coordinated. It's something I had to work at continuously. And in those activities, like coordination is key. And I was horrible at it, horrible. But the environments I was in, the people I had were so encouraging to that, especially because, you know, when you start something like that, you're gonna suck. You just are. Like nobody, if you naturally know how to throw a punch, if you naturally know how to do jujitsu, I congrats to you, but that wasn't me. And they really encouraged me to embrace being horrible at it, right? They were like, don't expect to be good for a whole year. Don't expect that at all. Just all you need to do is show up, whether it's good, it's bad, it's horrible, like it doesn't matter, just show up. And every time you show up, maybe you get one thing right, and then you can pat yourself on the back and come back the next time and show up and show
Mm.
up and show up. And so it was kind of like that process of like being really, really horrible that like helped me be like, oh, nobody cares. Like I'm really bad at this and nobody cares. And like people like celebrate you being bad because it means like
Mm.
you're trying, you know? So it's like they get excited about that. And that kind of helped to shift it for me in terms of other things, because being bad at something in your career is really vulnerable, right? Like you never want to go to work and be like, I don't know how to do this, I'm really horrible at it, right? Like
Mm.
I'm so bad at this. But it through that process, I was able to then like approach people at jobs or approach people that I felt were more experienced than me and really kind of be like, I want to know how to do what you do, right? Like I want to know. And for me, coaching is a way to kind of embrace that in a safer space than my work, right? Because I can go to
Mm.
a coach and be like, I have no idea how to do a P&L. I have no idea. I don't know what to do, but I need to do it for work. So I'm going to ask you all my questions. So when I go to work, I'm going to feel a little more confident stepping into that room. But yeah, as random as it was, martial arts helped me get over my fear of being at sucking in public, I should say, my fear of being horrible
Mm.
in public, right? Um, and that was really helpful.
That's really cool. I can relate to that with skateboarding, because you
Mm,
kind of like you don't want to go to the skate park and everyone else looks like on first perceptions that they know what they're doing.
yeah,
And you rock up and you're like, I can barely like stand on this thing, and you feel all like insecure and all that kind of stuff. But what for me, I was, if you sit there for a while, you actually see that every single person is at a different level. And even
yeah,
if they've been skating for 10 years, when they're learning a new trick, they are a complete beginner again. And they're
yeah,
like the 4-year-old, or they're like the very experienced person. And noticing that everyone is there. And then again, kind of related to like what you're martial arts teachers were doing was encouraging that keep trying. We celebrate
Yeah.
you for trying. So someone will be there over and over and not land a trick for hours, but it's like, yes, you're trying, and I recognize that determination. And then it does create that safer space. And then you also think like, yeah, like they wear me once,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll come over and say, like they'll say, I've been skating for 10 years or something, so that's why I can do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And when they say you just started, oh cool. And now people listening to the podcast are like, Kim, you've been banging on for skateboarding about over a year now. You should be better than this beginner thing you talk of. But
But it
yeah, I
it
think
doesn't ever go away, right? Like in some part, like even after doing something for like 10 years, there's sometimes you still feel like a beginner, right? Like you're just like, I don't know.
yeah.
Ah."
Even I'm just thinking now, like we've been writing and typing for like since school. There's still words that I'm like, oh my God, how do I spell that again? Or that word looks
Yeah,
weird. Is that actually how you
yeah.
spell it? But that's something that we should be innately expert at, but also beginner, and that's
I
okay.
still don't know how to spell the word thorough
Oh,
correctly. Like it takes me a moment every single time. I'm like, there's too many O's and U's in this. Like it's just that one thorough. Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. Do you, if I can ask you a question, like, do
Yeah.
you remember kind of like, because I feel when I talk to younger, and maybe it's just a natural growing phase, right? But when I
Mm,
talk to people who are younger than me, there's always like that fear of perception of like what people perceive you as, like your public image, right? And everybody's worried about their image and, oh, it's going to be
mm.
so embarrassing. And like when I hit my like 30s, especially by the time I was like 33, I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I'm not gonna wear makeup. I'm not gonna put on real clothes. I don't care what
Mm.
people think about me, right? And I think when
You've
you
done your
hit that,
10,000 hours of being you.
right?
You're
And when
entitled.
you kind of get to this point where you stop caring so much about like the perception, like even at work, like I care about being professional, I care about being a good coworker, but at the same time, like if somebody doesn't like me, uh, like I'm not rude to you, I'm not mean, like I try to be a pretty pleasant person to work with, and if you just don't like me, like it's not
Mm.
and or if I'm trying something new and like people have like an idea about it, I'm just like, like I'll tell people, hey, this is the first time I'm doing this. And so, like if you have any feedback for me, let me know. I want to improve. But do you remember for yourself, was there a moment when you realized like, oh, I don't care if people know this is the first time I'm doing it. Like, I don't care if people recognize that I'm trying something new. Like, or is that something you're still developing?
I think I have it. I'm trying to think what was the epiphany moment for me. It wasn't that long ago, I wouldn't say. Oh, different aspects of my life, I'd say it's introduced itself at different
Yeah.
times. Now I don't care if I'm, or like maybe 10 years ago, it was like, I don't give a shit if I'm not the best at sport anymore, because I didn't care about that anymore. I think some of the things though that helped me kind of knock that out of my system on more of the values driven things, or the things that were really hard for me to step in and own, where number one, it's very important to be my authentic self. So
Mm,
what that looked like, same, was if I wore makeup, if I did my hair, I felt like I wasn't embracing the body and um the skin and the hair that I was born with. And when I
mhm,
think there's other people that do not have that privilege to even be in a position to do that, then I'm like,
mhm.
Kim, you got to knock that out. Like,
Yeah.
I'm in a position of privilege, so therefore I embraced it. And I also remember having this epiphany. Actually, I was on a bus to Vegas. This was over 10 years ago, but I remember just thinking, half of the world's population at a minimum do not cover their face and are not afraid of wearing makeup. and then
Mhm.
all of the other people outside of the society that I'm part of don't. So therefore I was like, you should just stand up and have your face showing the way it is. So I
Yeah.
really stepped into that, but it was motivated by, if those people can do it, then you can too, especially when you've got everything going for you. And when I say everything going for you, I say it as like, I have my eyes, I can see, I have all
Mhm.
limbs intact. That sort of perspective helps me. And then another sort of kind of epiphany moment for me was, there's 7 billion plus people in the world, and we can all look at someone wearing a white t-shirt and jeans and go, love that style, hate that style, love it on them, not for me. So when there's
Yeah.
that much judgment on something so simple, what
Mm.
actually matters, because everyone has a different taste. Otherwise, we'd all fall in love with the same person. We'd all love the same burger flavor. We'd all love sweet potato fries and not potato fries or something like that. So when I was like, oh, it's like an inside taste or flavor
Mm.
or attractive or appeal meter, or gauge, that was just like, oh my god, you're never going to satisfy anything, so what does it matter
Yeah.
anyway? Okay, I'm so liberated. They were my things.
Yeah. And I think when people start to have those liberation like that type of epiphany, it's easier to translate it into other areas, right? Like you said,
Yes,
it started
definitely.
happening in one spot and then eventually it happened in more areas. And I think
Love
like
that.
for me it was sport as well, right? Like it was
Hmm.
martial arts and then it blossomed into other things. And yeah, and then I
Do you think
really
it's
fell
an
in love with
age thing?
coaching.
Because I feel like I'm meeting more people in their 30s that are just being more free. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you think it's an age thing from your
I
experience?
don't I don't know if it's just an age thing or if it's like a get rid of social media thing, like
Okay.
not get rid of it, but like the more people I talk to that kind of are like social media has its purpose, but it's not my life, right? Like they're
Mm.
not living through social media. Like I feel like they're kind of on that edge. Um, and that could also just be again in the society I live in the United States, right? Like that kind of wax and waning of like influencers are super popular and everything influencers do are fake and blah, and so you have this now kind of culture in between it that's like we recognize
Mm.
that social media is helpful for work and for business and for all of this, but it's not helpful for other areas of my life. And I think they start to look for those human connections again, right? Like versus just
Mm.
everything digital. So granted, this is digital, but it's still
Yeah,
human.
no, that's interesting. I think what it kind of summarizes for me from what we're both saying is, are you living for someone else or are you living for yourself? And it
Hmm.
sounds like you could probably say, I'm living for myself now. And the martial arts
Hmm.
experience was kind of your way of getting that. And for me, it was like, well, living for myself looks like being authentic in all situations.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
it easier. And when you're in the workplace and you're like, I want to learn how to do a profit and loss, like, and I have no idea, but yeah, that gives you that permission to say, well, I want to learn, I want to be better, like, help
Hmm.
me. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
now I'm contributing back and I'm experimenting and I'm trying this profit and loss.
Yeah. I also feel like if I tell people I'm new or learning something, it doesn't necessarily negate that I have skills in other areas, right? Like you hired me for my skills in this area, but now you're asking me to do this. So I'm going to tell you I don't really know how to do this,
Love
but it doesn't
that.
mean I won't figure it out, right? I'm not denying like I'm going to still deliver this with quality. It just might take me a bit longer. I might ask you a few questions, right? So because when I was teaching, if people are asking me questions, it doesn't bother me. Like, ask me all the questions you want. I want you to do
Mm,
this. So I usually like to tell people I've never done this before, or I like to come with like, okay, you wanted me to do this. This is what I looked up. Can you walk me through this and make sure I'm understanding it correctly?
yeah.
Because I feel like if you go to somebody with like, I tried this, can you tell me if it's right? They're a lot more appreciative than if you're like, nah, I have no idea. I don't know what to do. What do I?
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Okay, so in teaching life and like as you're kind of being that learner in the workplace, how can someone, when someone is learning and experimenting, trying for the first time, asking for help, how can the other person make them feel safe to be a beginner?
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? And that's why I've gravitated towards finding coaches or finding mentors or finding people who have that mindset, right? Like if you find a coach or a mentor, they know you're coming to them because you want to learn something, something that they're better at, right? Like I go to people, I'm like, you're better at this than I am. I like how you do it. I want to learn from you because, like I like your style, I like your attitude, I like how you do this. And I think it could be a good relationship, right? If you're going to somebody and they're like dismissive or rude or they talk down to you, you're never going to want to be vulnerable enough to tell them you're bad at something. So I think that's where coaching really comes in, because you can find the people that will take the time to say, hey, I was in this position and this is how I improve. Let's find what works for you, right? Like, or I'm more than happy to answer all of your questions, right? Like there's no truly, like, there are stupid questions, but if you're asking it about something you're learning, it's not a stupid question. It's random, like, so ask your questions, right? I think you have to find that right person, and it might not always be the person at work, right? So you might need to definitely find a coach or go somewhere else. Not necessarily always Reddit or social media. Like you might actually have to invest in that person to get where you want to be.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some things you've learned from coaches that you're like, shit, yeah, and now I'm a boss because of learning that thing from it?
I think it's something you kind of know, right? That people like to help people. But like from coaching, it's so true. Like people really like to help people. Like you can find people who really want to help you, like my relationship with you, when I come to you with stuff, like you absolutely, I feel that you want to help me, right? It's not like you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, she's gonna ask questions, right? And like I've had mentors in the past, like one of my mentors, her name was Josie, or her name is still Josie. And she was the person, yeah, she's a software engineer. And I went to her trying to figure out if I wanted to go into software engineering more deeply, or like if I wanted to pivot into where I am now, product management. And like I was with her for a whole year, and like ended up quitting my job, found a new job, did all of these things. And like, there was a huge amount of growth. And she genuinely wanted to help me. And like, even now I still talk to her, and like, she still like wants to help me. Like, it's amazing. Like, she'll be like, oh, I thought of you about this. Let me throw you this connection or do that. Right.
Love it. Yeah.
So I think what I find is a lot of people think their career is like, especially if you're talking about career or improving something that's like professional, people think they have to do it alone, right? Like it's very rare for, or maybe not as rare now, for people to be like, oh, I'm getting a coach, right? Outside of maybe like job interviews, like that's like the one thing people want to practice with somebody else. But what about like your presentation skills, your writing skills, any other thing, relationship skills, how to talk to stakeholders, like especially like how to figure out how to design something for another person, which is what you do in product management. Is you have to learn how to talk to your user, understand your user, ask them the right questions to get to their actual problems. And then, how do you figure out a solution that's not what you think is best, but actually what's going to be best for them in their situation? And that's not something that people innately know how to do, right? That's where I saw all your videos and I was like, oh, I like how you do this. I want to come hang out around you so I can learn how you do this, right?
Mm.
I'm losing my train of thought here, but helping
Keep
people,
going.
even a lot of
You're
help
adding
people.
value. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was it. It was like, what are the tips that you've got that you've taken
Yeah.
from these people that are so willing to help you, that now you're a bowler because you're applying it to your career or your life?
I think the biggest thing is just you're gonna fail a lot, a lot. And to not let it get you down. Like that's the biggest thing I learned from, I would say, Josie. Is just like every time she's like, everything you do is a learning opportunity. Whether it goes well or it doesn't, you're going to learn something from it. And I know you've said this in the past as well, but really with her, like every single time, because trying to change your career or applying for jobs or any of that, and also being a woman in tech, right? Things go wrong all the time, all the time, right? Like your job interview doesn't go well, you get denied because you're a girl and it's a man's club, and like there's people have pre-connotations about you being a woman in tech, and hopefully those are changing, but you get really discouraged, right? Like I've done interviews. I had an interview with Amazon once and I was really, really excited for it. And then there was this one interview where I knew I bombed. I just knew it. And I was just like so upset. And I wrote her to say that. And she was like, hey, you just learned something really important about like this situation. And I was like, I did? What did I learn? She's like, well, you tell me. And I was like, I guess what I learned is that, in this situation, I need to prepare more. I need to be more relaxed, right? And she's like, look, like you're figuring it out, right? So even though maybe emotionally or personally you had some feelings about this situation, whether you get the position or not, you're walking away with something.
Mm.
And that was something, like, so even yesterday, we were in a budget meeting and I didn't do very well because I couldn't answer all of these questions. But when I sat down and kind of tried to reflect and process on it, it was like, oh, I didn't do well because I didn't know X, Y, and Z information.
Mm.
And should I be expected to know this information or was it new information? Okay, it was a little bit of both. So what did I learn from this? One, I need to better prepare, right? And there were multiple opportunities that I could have asked my manager or I could have asked this person or that person, and I didn't, right? So one, I could have better prepared. And two, I could have spoken up and said, hey, I'm more than happy to get this information. I'm more than happy to learn this information. I just need more time, right? Rather than kind of freezing and feeling like I was being like put into a situation. I had the ability to take control of it. And then today, during a budget planning meeting, when a question came up, instead of feeling quiet, I was just like, oh, I have that. It's in this other document. I can get that for you now if you want to give me a few minutes, or I can give it to you at another time. And small story short, I didn't actually have it in another document, but I knew they would say they wanted it later, and they did. And then after the meeting,
I love it.
over to them. But I felt more prepared. That could have backfired on me horribly, but it didn't. So.
That's amazing self-awareness and kind of little like accountability questions for yourself. Like, so just encourage the people to listen back to that so they don't beat themselves up when something doesn't go their way. And yeah, that's really freaking cool.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's really not easy. Like if you do anything around like cognitive behavioral therapy or like some of the techniques to get away from negative thinking, like that's one of those things. Is if you notice yourself going down that path, like write it down and like check if it's true, right? So you're like, oh, I'm a horrible person. And you're like, is that true? Is that really true? Are you a horrible person? What? And you've said this to me before, like, what facts do you have to support that statement, right? Like, even for instructional design, what facts do you have to support that statement? I don't have any facts. It's just me. Okay, so you're not a horrible person. You're just unprepared, or you're upset, or something happened, and trying to remove, like, I don't know the word off the top of my head, but like your self-worth in like not doing something well, trying to remove that from like, that was the situation, that's not me as a person. It's really hard. I still don't do it all the time, but
yeah, it is hard, but and I think what happens is you get awareness of a tool, then it's the awareness, oh shit, I need to use that tool. Maybe 2 months later, when you've been freaking complaining about it for 2 months, and then you're like, oh, maybe I should try that fact checking tool. But over time, the more you remember to do that, the shorter the period comes, and then it's only 1 week of beating yourself up, and then it's 1 day, and then it's 1 hour, and then it's 1 minute, and then it's 1 second. That does take years to get there sometimes if you're a slow learner like me or something, but yeah, it's worth it.
But that goes back to what we were saying about our epiphany moments, right? Of like, for me in jujitsu, just come back. Just come back. You could have a horrible time, just come back, right? You know, or for skateboarding, like, people might look like they know what they're doing, but when you look really closely, it's not all, you know, cool tricks and Tony Hawk. People are over, you know, so.
Yeah. You started talking about like the end users and talking to people and that, and so you're in the product space, so the product industry, like, they know about talking to end users, testing, piloting, human-centered design thinking. Introduce people. So you're an instructional designer, you do actually write course curriculums and stuff like that, but you're also a product manager. You have your life is busy with lots of projects and like, what do you call them, contracts, so I guess not contracts, but projects that you're playing at. But help people understand the role of a product manager and the activities that you might do as part of your process.
So in an ideal world, right, a product manager, somebody says like, hey, our users have this problem, or we want to solve a problem in this space. And then you kind of like interview people and do some research to be like, what's the actual problem, right? You know, there's that famous quote that like, if I talked to people, they would have wanted, no, that's not a good quote to use, because that's the reverse of what I'm trying to say. But a lot of what product managers do is they really try to figure out what's the best thing to build for the problem that the users are having, right? Not that the company wants to solve, right? So like my company, I work in their professional development department. So they are building courses, and I'm helping them try to find the balance of just building something because it sounds great, or like they feel like they have an audience for it, and building something that there's actually an audience for it, right? You know, because it's like, oh, we really love nurses and we want to build this course for nurses around this. And you're like, that's great. Like, how many nurses need this course? And then you start doing the research and you're like, okay, out of like the 50,000 nurses, say there's 50,000 nurses in this institution, only 10 of them have this problem. So we're not going to build a course for this because only 10 people have this problem. But through this research and through talking to people and figuring out, we found that, you know, 45,000 people have this problem, right? So can we build a course for this? So there's a lot of like that, of going back and forth of like, okay, we figured out what the problem is. Like, now how do we actually build it, right? Like, how do we actually build something that's going to help? And again, you have like, well, this is what we think we should build. And you're like, okay, we're going to take what you think and we're going to go back to users and say, react to this. Is this what you were thinking would solve your problem? And then they come back and they're like, yes or no, right? And if they're like, no, you're like, okay, what's missing, or what else would you want? And sometimes that's a back and forth process that goes on for quite some time. But like, that's the ideal state of a product manager, is like you're working with the company to solve a problem and get to talk to the users to make sure it's actually what they want and not just like what the company wants, and then it fails. Nobody wants it.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the challenges that you have faced is where the business thinks they need this thing. As you say, there's 10 nurses that are like, yeah, that'd be great. But then you've got something sitting there where 45,000 people want it. What kind of discussions, or how are you getting that, like, someone's opinion to like the actual what the market needs? How do you close the gap on that?
Yeah, that's something I'm still figuring out. I'm still figuring that out. It's hard because like you'll have board members or like executives or people in higher positions, and they'll be like, we want this, right? And this will cost us like $1 million to build. And now you're like, but only 10 people want it. And they're like, well, figure out how to get more people to want it. And you're just like, oh, I don't want to, because there's not that many people who want it. And so what I've been doing has been like, okay, I'm just gonna keep giving you data. And I distinctly remember a conversation you and I had where you're like, you don't want to invalidate what they want, right? They clearly want something for a reason, and you kind of have to find out like what's their reason, what's their why, what's their stake in the game for asking this, right? Like, is it they want this because this person told them that they needed X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 and that's how they thought they were going to solve that problem? In which case I can be like, well, your actual problem is this. So let me show you what I have here. This is what's going to solve that problem, right? Or is it more of a personal reason, in which case it requires a little bit more of like a discussion of like, oh, okay, I get it. Like this is kind of a bit of a personal project that you had further on about blah, blah, blah. But instead of spending all of this money, can we do like a focus group? And then you get to see, like at a much smaller scale, how much this isn't going to work. like can we do it that way, right? Or what can I do to help you recognize that what you want might have good intentions, but like, and you almost have to design something for the person asking for the thing and not for the users, in a way that's not going to cost a lot of money, which has been a very interesting space to be in. I've tried PowerPoints, I've tried like mock-ups, I've tried just conversations, back of the napkin drawings, like debate. There's no like right way or wrong way, because it's all specific to the person that you're speaking to, right? So I don't have a good answer for that. Still learning, but I think the key thing is back to human-centered design. Like if I know the product's going to fail through all of my research and data, then now my customer is the person asking for it. And so how do I design a solution for them, whether it's basically to help them realize that it's not the right decision, right? Like how do I get it right for them? What's the message that they need? How are they going to get this information? How would they receive it? And whether that's a presentation, whether they like numbers, whether I need to work with a business analyst to get more financial forecasting, marketing to get more numbers and research, right? So it's just changing the focus from external customers to the internal customers.
Yeah, that's cool. I like how you are trying to find out how to, like, if they're money driven, you're going to the finance people and say, okay, do the numbers on this scenario and this scenario, and then you can present it and help influence a little bit.
Yeah,
maybe still trying because someone really wants a course for the 10 people.
yeah, but I mean that we have a mission driven part of the company, right? That does a lot of good things for people that don't make money. And so it's like, well, you want this to make money, but it's not, but it doesn't mean you can't still do the course if we move it to the mission driven side of the company, but it's going to take longer because that has like a waiting list of things that are requested to get done. Some people don't like to hear that, but we just did budget meetings this week, and you're like, if this is the revenue target you're signing up for, do you see how this is not going to help you reach that target? That's not always an easy conversation. I think that's something else I've learned. There's no way to get around having the not easy conversation. There's no way around it. You just got to do it.
Interesting. Any tips for that?
Nope.
Still learning. Nope. Beginner day one.
Yep. Every time I go in, I'm like sweating, and I'm just like, oh, why do I feel like I'm about to tell you, like, you're like a doctor who's like, oh, I'm so sorry, the patient has passed. Like I get so nervous.
Oh gosh, yeah. I think that's something I'm just going to reflect out loud, because I feel like I need to do that next week with something I'm working on. And it's almost like sometimes I try to, like we spoke about, predict what the other person cares about, use that language back on them. But I almost wonder, is it about not preparing this time and just facilitating the conversation, asking the questions so they have the realization themselves that you already know this is not going to work. And this is not going to work purely because of your things or the evidence that has come up. Because then you need them to have the epiphany and realization and not make them wrong. And yeah,
that's a really important thing, like not make them wrong, because it's not that they were wrong per se, it's not what you want, right? It could still be a good course, it could still be a good idea, but for the situation you're presenting, I want this course to do blah, not the right answer, right? So 1 plus, what is it, 2 plus 2 equals 4, but 1 plus 3 also equals 4, but 5 minus 1 also equals 4. You want the 2 plus 2 answer, but in this situation, it's the 5 minus 1, right? Like yours isn't wrong, it's just not right for the situation you presented.
Yeah. Interesting.
Unless they're
okay, I want to go back. What was that?
Unless they're actually really wrong.
Well, in my instance, I am thinking you are very wrong. And I have documented evidence that you don't remember being in the recorded meeting. So that's my challenge.
Yeah.
This is not Kim's coaching session. No, I'm joking. Maybe I should take advantage. So Amanda, I would love to know.
Just empathize, I understand you have so much going on, you're super busy, things get hectic, but I want to remind you, or like, but I remember you being here. It shows that you were here. Maybe you're confusing that meeting with a different one that you weren't able to attend. Maybe, like, give them the benefit of the doubt first. If you're going to present hard facts like that, like maybe you just didn't remember because you got mixed up with another one because you're so busy or something's going on, and I understand, but like, this is what we talked about.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll report back.
Yeah. Great.
One of the things you were mentioning is around like so if with that course it's like someone saying do this course and you've gone, but there's only 10 people saying they want it, and then they're saying we'll find more than 10. What's your approach to go out and market and find, or not, I don't want to put solutions in your head, but how do you find more people?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the hard part, right? If one person's having the problem, it's very rare that it's only actually going to be one person, right? So and the world's so big that, statistically, at least X amount of people are going to have the same problem. So it would sell somewhere to sell to someone, but is it worth me trying to find that, right? Like, in order, there's marketing conversion rates, there's numbers tied to ads and things like that, and you can push it so far. But like, that's when I work with the marketing team to say, in order to break even on this course, we need 100 people to sign up, right? There's only 10 people that I'm finding in a population. If out of 50,000, only 10 people are going to want this course, and I need 100, then how do I get this course in front of 5 million people to get the right math, to get the conversion number I'm going to need to get to 100 people, right? And then they'll kind of work their magic and give me some numbers. And then I can say, okay, you really want this course. It's going to cost this much to make. To break even on just the build of the course, we would have to market to this many people. And now marketing is going to cost X, Y, and Z. And so to even, like, we're never going to really kind of get ahead of it at a certain point. However, I hear this is really important to you. And, you know, like this 10 people, right, this problem, if we kind of scope it out a little bit more, can we solve kind of this thing out here that might lead down to that smaller course? Can we build a funnel, right? And if we can do that and figure out how to get more of these people in, then we can build your course, because you'll have the audience for it without having to spend the marketing on it. But then that's also playing the long game of being like, now we have to build blank, 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 blank for so many years to get to the 1% that you really want. Is that the strategy we can go on? And that's just another conversation. And that ultimately, if they say build it, they will come. You build it knowing that you gave them all the answers ahead of time and hoping that by some miraculous thing, they're right and you're not. Because the one thing about product is, like, when it goes right, it's everybody else's, you know, everybody else gets celebrated because they did all the work. But when it goes wrong, you're the one who gets in trouble because you're the one who wrote the plan. So yeah, it, at some point there's no return, right? Like there's a very limited amount of like, you're not gonna, unless it's a mission driven thing, it's not going to help your business, right? Like at some point. And so if they still want it, you can do it, but you would hope they're smart enough to recognize, like, if you're giving them enough data, like, hey, it's going to take 5 million people just to sell 100 courses based on our marketing conversions, that really the effort you want to go into, when we could sell this course over here and we could get 500 sales in 6 months because we already have the audience for it, right? Like a lot of,
that's good.
yeah.
What you were just describing there was really good problem solving, like lots of questions considering different situations, scenarios, stakeholders, outcomes. Are you able to kind of reflect on how you know what questions to ask?
Oh my gosh, I listen to so many podcasts and just things of like designers, UX designers, UX researchers, YouTube videos of people like asking questions, because I don't know if you can ever, it's a skill, right? Like I recognize you have this skill. You're very good at it. Like when I talk to you, you are very good at asking key questions for certain things. And this is a skill I'm still trying to develop, right? Problem solving skills. I really like watching engineering things because I feel like engineers have a very logical way of solving problems. And if you can kind of learn some of those engineering, like statistical mindsets, like it gets really easy at like figuring out basics of problems. But the harder part is the relational part and the politics of it. I hate politics, but the politics of like stakeholder relationships and all of that, and like really good like the David Letterman videos, or like comedians in cars with coffee, these types of podcasts. There's like the podcasts where like this, where you're talking to people around specific topics, or just anything where somebody's kind of like interviewing another person, just to hear what do they ask, what kind of sparks people to go down a certain direction. You know, that's kind of where I go to, and I just try to absorb that as much as I can, because I think it's a skill, and I don't know if you don't feel it, I don't know if there's not like a list you can really do in my head outside of the 5, like who, what, when, where, why, and just ask why 50 million times, and then you know, and then how do we get that why, right? But yeah, like Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, like they have really good questions. I love watching comedians, because I feel like that, like if you are as good of a storyteller as some of these really great comedians, then you can nail almost any presentation, right? Like, so highly recommend that. But talk shows are great for questions.
What are you observing from comedians in the storytelling?
So usually it's kind of like impact, like different comedians will put different emphasis on different things to create an impact or to create an emotional response. And like if you're trying to convince somebody, that's what you want. Also, comedians tend to have really good observational skills. And so when you try to think of like, how did somebody get to that observation? Like what were they doing to kind of get to that realization? It gets you into this thinking process where you're like, okay, how do I observe? Like you start to observe the world in a similar way, or at least I sometimes do. And so I think it's that observation too that really helps. Like all of those active listening stuff. Like if you're not really listening to a person, you can't ask the right questions. But a lot of people don't really know how to listen. Like they listen to respond, or they're not they're listening to respond in a way that like makes them feel good about themselves, versus like listening to what the person is actually saying. And I'm guilty of this so many times, especially if I haven't had coffee. Like I'm just like, I just want to, what are you saying so I can answer you, right? Versus like, okay, no, let me listen to what you're saying so I can make sure to ask the right question to get the information that I need.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
It also gives you permission to a lot of shows.
I like it. That's awesome. What else have I got?
What do you do to learn how to ask better questions? How did you get so good at asking questions?
I'm always just thinking, what is the intent here? What is the problem I'm trying to solve or they need from me? So if I think about a coaching situation, I've said this to you before, I can never prepare for what you might bring or anyone might bring, or when you're facilitating. But when a person comes to you for coaching, the one outcome you know is that you're moving them from current state to a future desired state. So I just think about what question now might help that person move themselves forward. So I'm actually just trying to process this as we speak. So I'm listening from your story. Is there a limiting belief there? Is there a challenge? Is there a pain point? So I'm listening for that. And then I'm like, okay, well, what is your own solution for that specific thing that you've actually brought up? I think I'm just creating the space, especially in a coaching space, for you to process your own stuff. So there's that side of it. I think that frame of mind. When I'm in an instructional design role and someone is giving me lots of information, like you were talking about, it's like, do I need to know the marketing and how many courses, and I think, yeah, the break even and how many do we have to sell, what's the price point. Sometimes you can just go into overload with all these questions, because you're like,
Mm,
what is the answer, what if, whatever it is, like what if. And so then, instead of getting overwhelmed, I'm like, what's the immediate problem I'm trying to solve right now? And then I kind of flick between, okay, is it just is this person needing to vent, or are they actually looking for a solution right now? And I think that is
yeah.
a listening thing. They talk about that in relationships as well, like human relationships, in terms of like, does this person want to express, or do they want a solution? So I'm trying to gauge, what mode am I supposed to be in, and then therefore what question am I asking.
Mm,
um but well, that's why this is called Learning with Belvista Studios as well, is that I am in a place of curiosity. So I'm
yeah.
continuously just existing in a place of curiosity. And sometimes I have a mission. And sometimes that mission is in a coaching session where my mission is to serve the person to move them forward. Another example is, so I'm not really big on small talk, and it happened the other day in how I live my life. I meet a lot of people that want to ask the same question every time they meet, and they just come along like little ants, and then they ask that question. You can see them coming, and they're going to ask you. And I don't want to answer that question for because it's meaningless. I'm about quality
Hmm.
interactions. So then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have an interaction with this person. How can it add value to my life? My immediate
Hmm.
next thing is, how can I create an experience that makes them have a more positive impact on the
Mm,
world and go out there? So they're my two missions. One for me, I just want to get them to a state of gratitude. So I had a conversation yesterday with someone random, just said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." Oh no, how's your day going? That was what it was. How's your day going? I was like, you don't really care. We just happen to be standing here awkwardly together, and you want to fill the silence. So then I just turned around and I'll say, and I don't want to tell you how my day is going, because I'm the kind of person right now, I'm going very deep with the answer. I do like that
mm,
kind of stuff. So I'm going, well, right now I don't have the time for you to add value to my life. How can I make you be a better human and impact the world? That's my second mission. So then I just say, what's an awesome thing that you're grateful for today? Or what's
mm,
something that's excited you today, so that I can have them a little bit perked up and happy. And then we leave our little interactions, and hopefully they smile at the next person.
yeah.
So I'm very like intentional. So it's always like, what's the problem I'm trying to solve right now,
Yeah.
is basically my key thing. And then that's, from that place of curiosity, is how I get the questions that come out, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you
And
summarize that back? I feel like I went
yeah.
over.
So what I heard you say was there's two things that really drive you. One, and your two personal missions, right? And one is, if you're in a coaching session, how can you bring that person to like their future state, their desired state, or leave that situation feeling some sort of gratitude or some uplifted emotion? I do have one really random question, and this is just
Mm,
something that I think about, right? It's like a lot of what we've talked about in terms of learning, in terms of asking questions and stuff, is the basis of it is relationship building, or having relationship
mm,
with somebody else, or being comfortable in a state of vulnerability with another person. And with the rise of social media, with the pandemic and all of this, that creates social distancing and people having less of that interaction, I kind of wonder two things. One, if coaching is on the rise kind of because of that, right? Like, personal coaching is really big. Get a coach for this, get a coach for that, get a coach for this, right? Like in I think it started first with fitness, and then it became really big with life coaching, and then it became big with career coaching, and like now there's like I'm wondering, with the pandemic and how a lot of people had to pivot and do things, if now instead of like going to an institution, coaching is kind of like the filler in between.
Is it? Maybe it's more accessible. Maybe it's a cheaper option. Maybe people see it as a quicker option, an immediate option, like quicker to get the results, immediate access to the improvement.
And then how do you make sure you have a good coach?
I think, like you said it well at the beginning, on how you kind of pick your people, is you've got your way into their world, stalked them. Yeah. Stalked them, felt that they were your tribe. And it was something I wrote down actually when I was thinking about chatting to you, is around finding people that speak your language and finding your tribe. And I remember you telling me a story around the marketing manager. You feel like you've expressed some of the story today where you're like, this doesn't make sense, people. Like, I'm literally giving you the data, you're trying to convince people, and that it's just not making sense. And then this new person came on, the marketing person, they're like totally on your side. Like, how are we even having these conversations? The data doesn't make sense, And then you finally were like, somebody speaks my language. And I just think the power of that, they are there, and that's where people go. I always describe it as like, are you holding hands with someone and going with them, or are you dragging that person along? Or are you being pulled by a person? So being pulled by a person for me is someone that inspires me. They are leveling me up, and I'm like, oh my God. But quickly, when I'm exposed to that, I'm then like, shit, jump, leap to be with them and hold hands with them. But then for me, I'm very quick. If I feel like I'm pulling the person along, we're not aligned. My style doesn't work with them, because I can crack the whip, right? I cut through the bullshit. I want results. I'm action focused because that's who I'm focused on. And then I guess the people that I work with, or that are people that are attracted to me, because I never try to convince people to choose us. It's because it's not going to work. You've got to self-select. So like you fall into our ecosystem, you have a selection, and you go, they resonate. They're my tribe. That's my working style. That's the kind of personality that's going to get me what I want for myself. And then when we do come together, like it's so beautiful to work with you. And I say that is like, it's so amazing because you put it there. I just have to go, here's a little 1% thing. And you're like, I've now made it the other 99 myself. And I'm like, yes, how cool is that? And you take it beyond, and you apply it to the 3 different jobs that you're doing, or the projects, or the different contexts, and if I was in the same position, that's how I would work as well. So it's that fit, I guess.
Yeah. And I like what you said. Like, it's when you're with somebody who speaks your language, I feel like it's a lot easier to action on things that they tell you, right? Because I'm like, oh, I get it. I get what you're saying.
The amount of times, like, when I'm working with you and you will cut me off and you say, I get it, Kim, next. Because you've connected the dots, got it there. I've just kind of, I don't revealed a little bit, like,
or
pulled
I
the
get
blanket,
excited.
and you're like, oh yeah.
I'm like, oh, like this.
Yeah.
Like, like that. It's like,
yeah.
And that excitement is fun. Yeah.
And I think it's I was just gonna say, before you go in, it's the ability to chew through the fat quickly. So it's not right, like with a therapist, a psychologist, if it's not right on the first thing, don't go back, go find someone else. Like, there are your tribe there, and when you find them, you're just lighting fires together like fireworks, and it's magic, and you excel in leaps and bounds. And that's the way those kinds of coaching or beginner relationships should be.
I had a completely unrelated thought, but I really like what you said about, if it doesn't work, don't go back, right? There's so much about like, oh, if first you don't succeed, try again. And yes, but in relationship wise, like for a coach or a therapist, like, usually within the first 2 or 3 meetings with that person, like the same like dating, usually you can tell within the first 3 meetings or so whether or not like they're a fit, right? And if they aren't, you're paying them. There's no harm in like saying, you know what, this doesn't work for me and moving on. There's a lot of people I talk to who will hire the first person and then just stay with them, even if it's not adding value. And like, that's not gonna help you in any way, shape, or form, right? Like that's like, it's not a good, but they're so scared of like telling that person it's not a fit. And it's just like, it's not a fit.
No, it's okay. And you don't even have to excuse yourself, I don't think. Like, if you don't want to, just leave. You are paying for a service. Like, yeah, you're paying for a service. It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another
Uh,
thought.
yeah. And again, going back to the pandemic, there's so many people, there's so many kids who really lost, in my opinion, a very important developmental stage of relationship building and human empathy and like learning how to talk to people that you get when you're younger in school and social situations and like going to these places. Like when you're a kid, that's really the chance to make all of these mistakes and kind of learn that it's okay. And I'm very curious to see how businesses and kind of like coaching and relationships and all that stuff evolve as that generation starts to grow up. Because I'm very curious to see if they kind of have lost a lot of that and it's going to be a lot harder, or if they're almost going to overcorrect, or like how that's going to, you know, I'm very curious around that.
I don't know. I don't think we lose skills that we really need as humans. And when we need that skill, we'll find a way to make it a part of our toolbox. So if you're alluding to I don't know, the social skills of a child right now who may not have been exposed to talking to people or adults, what is that going to mean when they go into I don't know, their first job where they have to talk to adults and they've never done that before? They'll step up. People make it work. So for me, I don't even worry about kind of stuff like that, because I don't know, it doesn't, I just think we will step up. We make it work always, because our basic needs are around safety and security, and then we move on. So if we literally had no money or had no food, and it was at that point as an adult, we will ask for help. Please, have you got a spare $5? Can you please buy me a pizza in there, you know, to get by? So I feel like we always make it work. And if it's not having it, it's not a necessary thing for us right now. The motivation doesn't exist. We don't see a benefit. We don't see the what's in it for us. So therefore we put a pause on it, you know?
Yeah. I like your statement of we won't lose the skills that are really important to us. Like we'll find a way to make it work, right? So for me, learning and education was really important to me. I found a way to make it work. Even though I wasn't teaching, I found a different way. So I think that's like a really good bring it
back
all around.
Well, now I'm like, I have a question that's going to keep this conversation going.
Keep it going.
Okay. Because on that, what you've brought up around like the skill, like are they lacking, blah, 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 is there any, I want to validate my thinking now, I'm trying to get some evidence, is there anything in your life that you need right now as a skill but don't have?
Oh,
need, like need
like need,
not a want.
yeah, that's a really hard, a skill that I need. I don't know if there's a skill that I need, right? I think once I learned how like if I need something, I know I can learn it, right? Once I figured that out and I knew I could do it, right? Like I've done a lot of things just to prove I could do them, right? Like I
Interesting.
ran a marathon just to prove I could do it. I did a triathlon just to prove I could do it. I've done like I joined a sorority in college just to prove I could do it. Like I've done a lot to prove to myself that if I need to, I can rely, like I can trust myself. I can rely on myself. I can do it, right? Move to a different country by myself just to prove I could do it, right? Once I learned that, there isn't really a skill that I need, right? Because I know I can do it. But I think if I didn't have that, and I guess it goes back to like, I didn't have a trust in my own abilities to a certain point, then there might be a lot of things skills that I feel that I need, right? There's things I'd like to improve. I'd want to improve. I'm trying to improve. And there's skills that I would like to improve that I'm actively not trying to improve. They're still on the shelf over there. But yeah, that one lesson of like, you can trust yourself to do what you need to learn what you need to when you need it, because you've done it X, Y, and Z, and here's the data to show you, right? That was good after that.
That's the thing. You found your safety net. So when it does become a moment of need, you are fully trusting yourself that you will be able to learn it to perform or get the result when it matters.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. For me, it was a very physical process.
I
moved, I ran,
washed
did jujitsu, did a tournament, like there's what I don't know why it had to be beaten into me that you can trust yourself.
Listen to a podcast, I'm like, ooh, that sounds dodgy. I listen to your story and I've learned, and I'm like, yeah, I will never be doing martial arts because I've learned through you.
I recommend some type of marathon or triathlon. I think I recommend a physical activity.
There's no need. You need to.
But even like surfing, right? Like that's a very physical activity. And if you're not, if it's like in surfing though, if you go under at the wrong moment and you're stuck under a wave and like that undercurrent, and you're not sure, like you can't figure out which way is up, and you don't know how to regulate your breathing or hold yourself, like that's really scary. But if you don't go back to it, if you don't recognize that, oh, you can figure that out, right? Like I think there's something about the physical, about like working through the physical for me that really helps with the mental. Like otherwise I just kind of get stuck in my head. But if I can overcome it physically, or like even with like meditation, or like Wim Hof, when you're doing there's a hyperventilation type of breathing technique that teaches you how to hold your breath and like how to work with the sensations in your body. Like that to me, really learning my body really helped me learn how to trust myself, I guess.
It is really cool because I think the whole conversation is around being the beginner is scary, but when you can trust yourself and give yourself a little bit of evidence that you're going to be okay, and that you have some sort of moment where you reflect on what's my safety net so that I can trust myself if this escalates to be a bigger thing, or something like that, you're all good and you do it. And I think that's knowing yourself, which is what we're talking about, is you do it by you put yourself in a physical thing. I'm actually more of a visualization style where I'm like, yeah, how's a bungee jump? Yeah, it seems scary. I've watched movies where those things snap. Okay, I've got my safety net, not doing that. Whereas you're like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And if I'm scared halfway down, probably decide not to do it a second time.
I've gone skydiving, I've done a bungee, I've done like, there's just something about it.
Yeah. So when it's important to us, the moments that matter, we will step up. We can make it work. We always will. And that's why I think the permission for everyone here to be the beginner is, if you're not willing to do it and not be the beginner and be vulnerable is probably not an important thing for yourself to be exposed to right now. You don't want to be learning that. It's not a priority for you right now, but just trust that when it fucking is a priority, you will be brilliant and you'll make it happen. And you'll make it happen to the minimal viable effort that it needs to be, I guess.
Yeah. And it's okay to flirt with it for a while. Watch those YouTube videos. Flirt with it all you can. You know, like at a certain point you'll either decide, okay, this is actually something I want to do or learn, or no, like you said, it's not important. But don't put pressure on yourself unduly to do it immediately if like there actually isn't that need, you know.
Yeah. Amanda, thank you for this chat. It was good. Good processing time, I feel. If people want to connect with Amanda, check the link in the description. You can check her out online. You are sharing what you learn, and you're good energy to be around as well, so it's a good connection to have. But I'm very grateful for you to spend the time with us, allow us to be curious, to learn from you, and to learn to be a beginner and be okay with that. And that I've seen the results that you've got for yourself by exposing yourself in that way. So it's very inspiring, and I encourage people to embrace that for themselves as well.
Yeah. And just so if you want to learn human-centered design, if you want to be around a great person, if you just want somebody to hold you accountable or make you have good realizations that you didn't even realize you could have, highly recommend hooking up with Kim. And I went through her human-centered design course, and it was really like amazingly helpful, even in my non-instructional design things. And so like you might be a project manager or product manager, or you might think it doesn't apply to you, but I promise you it does. Probably more than you think. So I highly recommend it.
Thank you. It's a life skill. It really is. Human-centered design. Thank you for that, love. I really, really appreciate it. That was unsolicited, not paid for.
Totally unsolicited. She knows I love her every time.
Thank you. All right, folks. Cheerio until next time. What's up, awesome human? Thank you on behalf of myself and the Belvista Studios team for continuously choosing to learn with us. We really appreciate it. If the tips and the insights and the context resonate with you and you want to take your skills to the next level, or you want to make your life way easier, you will love our Creator Hub. The Creator Hub is a place for people like you and us. Basically, it's the stuff that we use internally at Belvista Studios, and then we just share it publicly with you. The Creator Hub is created by instructional designers for instructional designers, and what you'll love there at the moment is we've got a quiz, Could I Be a Better Instructional Designer?, that has so much tips in the feedback if you're interested in human-centered design or just taking your skills to the next level in terms of the solutions you're creating and the problems you want to solve. But in there as well, aren't we cute? That's us. But we've got the coaching courses, freebies, give us gratitude, and also we've got some templates. And basically they're always around the lens of learning experience design, instructional design, and e-learning. So a human-centered design focus is very much what we're about at Belvista Studios. So putting your learners at the heart of a solution and creating something for their needs. So there's the human-centered design stuff, and then we've also got the business stuff. So this is the stuff they don't teach you about when you want to become a freelancer or a consultant in the instructional design world. So go check it out. The link is in the description. You can check out everything that is available for you. Thank you for choosing to learn with us. Continuously invest in your skills. You will be rewarded as an instructional designer. Share this stuff, share it with other people, because when we are better instructional designers, we create better solutions that create better humans, that create a better world. So we have a very important role, and I'm excited to be on this journey with you. Have an awesome day.